What's up, everyone? Welcome to season 4 of My Boulevard podcast. This season, we're doing something special. I am here with my co-host, Missy. Say what's up to the people, Missy.
Hello, I'm so excited to join you, Dhati. I'm looking forward to the opportunity to talk about the who, what, when, where, how, and why of urban missions.
That's right. This season, we are going to be walking through together, like live, real conversations. We're going to be talking about real questions, really practical wisdom about how to do ministry in urban environments.
Yeah, this is going to be a primer for all of us. So let's join this journey. Let's grow, learn, and push forward urban missions together.
Stay tuned. This season, we're going to talk about how you can do ministry where you live, where you work, and where you worship. So let's go.
Let's go.
All right, Missy, we're gonna try this again, like last time, So I'm just gonna let you know. All right, you ready? You ready for this?
I'm better. I'm back and better.
All right, here we go. Welcome to season 4, episode number 7 of This Is My Boulevard podcast. I am Dhati Lewis,
and I am Missy Branch.
There it is. You see, that's how
confidence.
that works.
I
confidence.
Wasn't stepping out
you
in confidence.
stepped out on faith, and that was great. I'm glad that it happened. So we are continuing all things urban, and today, we're going to talk, and it kind of brings me a little nervousness because, people already think we're just an organization about the church, but it's more than the church. It's more than the local church, like we talked about. But the church is essential, and it is God's plan. So we are going to talk about this. But today we're going to specifically ask, how can the church show up more effectively in urban spaces?
I mean, the church is God's vehicle.
Yeah.
So, we got to talk about it.
We got to talk about it. We have to talk about it. So we're jumping into it. And, and I pastor a church and all that. And so let me give the disclaimers up front. Like, I'm not talking at anyone.
Right.
I am talking with, as someone who is lamenting, right, just the state of the world and the state of the church. And, and I'm thinking about, and again, when I'm talking church, for the purposes of this podcast right now, we're talking about the local church and how we are expressing ourselves locally. We're not talking about the global church. We're not talking about Christians. So I just wanted to kind of, throw that caveat out there, as we talk about church today. So, yeah.
One of the things I do think is, I think it's a misnomer that churches are not doing anything, right? We spend a lot of time with a lot of Christians in a lot of spaces, and we know the local churches are serving their communities. So again, just to be clear, this is no secret message to somebody that we think is not doing anything. But I do often wonder if people know exactly how their church can show up. I think there's a lot still to learn and more opportunities that can be taken advantage of.
Yeah. And I think that's another disclaimer, because we do not have anybody's churches in mind as we are talking about this podcast. We wasn't like, hey, this is a great way to talk about so-and-so's church without, this is not that, right? We're just talking about, we love urban. We love Christ, right? We want to see impact. We love the mission, right? We are trying to strengthen missionaries. And so, in a good part, I think about half of our missionaries are church pastors and leaders. They primarily use the church as their vehicle to express. And so, although we have poets and practitioners and polymaths, we also have pastors, people that are utilizing and expressing through the local church. And so I just think that it's important for us to talk about that, and so when we think about the church, the local church, showing up more effectively in urban spaces, as someone who has been a part of church planting teams, you've planted church, you have been a part of churches, you were raised in the church?
Yeah. When my mom became a believer, that's all we did.
And what age were you when your mom became a believer?
Well, I didn't live with my mom when she became a believer, but when I moved and lived with her, I became a believer. I want to say about 6 years old. So
6 years old.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the moment she became a believer, no lie, my other address was the church.
So we can effectively say you are a church kid. Yes. All right. Because, I'm coming from a completely different side. I was not a church kid. I was not someone who was raised in the local church. I discovered the local church at the grand age of 20 years old. And that's when I started coming. I mean, when I tell you, it is like, I didn't know stories like David and Goliath. Like, who are these people? Like, I was just like, so I'm when I'm talking about unchurched, I'm talking about unchurched. And I say that that's important because oftentimes what missionaries will oftentimes talk about, they would say, we got to go to people who have never heard the gospel. There's so much access to the gospel here. And I tell people, somehow I was able to navigate 20 years of my life without having Christian conversations, because I wasn't opposed. I was not a person who was like anti-church or like I was like, fist up to God. It was just like, it just wasn't a thing. It just didn't play a factor in anything.
Yeah, it's like sushi in the hood. I had never had sushi
before. Oh no, you know what else I never had was hummus. I discovered hummus when I was 30-something years old.
Where was hummus in the hood?
Like it never
exists, right? So it's like,
yes,
it ain't new, but it's news to the hood. Right?
Yep. This is what I'm saying.
I would say one of the disadvantages to growing that can happen growing up in the church is that those stories like David and Goliath and those things you grew up with can be just stories. This is urban legend. This is just a thing I've heard it so many times. Yeah, David, Goliath. And they're more like Marvel characters than they are humans with issues that help me understand and know God better.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that is spot on, because that's one thing that I learned very early, because what God used is like, man, Christians know their Bible because they knew Bible stories. Right. And then I realized, they know Bible stories, but they don't really know how all the pieces fit. No. Right. And that was something that I really learned early in my walk, and so, and what's interesting was I remember being in like my early days, because I shared earlier that I joined a ministry with Impact, and after the conversion, my call to ministry, learned about contextualization. After I graduated, I ended up being on staff with Impact, and I remember when God was like, I felt this call to plant a church, and I remember saying, Lord, are you calling me to start a church? And I was like, I don't even like church. Like, I mean, those were words that would literally came out of my mouth. Like, I don't even like church, because I felt like, I was like, what are we doing in church? Right? Besides like the same thing. And it was interesting because all we had on campus for first year or two was all we had was a gospel choir. And what it felt like in our gospel choir was all we were trying to do was reiterate what we did in church. Right? It's just like, if we can do what we do in church, in the gospel choir,
then we did it.
Then, and that was just like that just seemed like just copy and paste these same kind of environments and everything. And I was just like, I didn't get it. And again, it wasn't like judgment. I didn't get it, because it was just simply like, I don't know what to do, because is it just go and attend church?
Well, and I think that's also because often churches don't know what to do. You think because someone pays their bills every month that they're good with money. Yeah. They're good at paying their bills. Yeah. Being good at money means that they can make other decisions and invest and grow it and all that kinds of things. And so I think that often churches are doing the best they can. They're paying their bills every month, but do they actually know the ways that they can impact that community in a more contextualized way? Because you're right, a gospel choir will meet the needs and scratch the itch of a certain demographic, but only that demographic. Yeah. And yet this community is bigger than this particular demographic. Yeah.
For someone like you who can sing, and is about to come out with her own solo,
and the
choir, for someone like, but for someone like me who is tone deaf and can't like,
not even tone deaf, deaf.
See, the TH, tone deaf. Like when you hear me, you're just like, there's something died inside of it, like the tone, the beat. Catch it, Dhati, catch it. Like I tell people all the time, like the Lord gave all of the musical, all of that talents to my older brother and my younger brother, and it's just like, you don't need any of it.
Wow. Okay.
So it's just kind of like, but I love music, but it's just like, that's it. That's it. And
right.
And so the gospel choir, like, so literally when I would go, and again, this is not about gospel choirs, but when I would go to the thing, like I was that, like the loud, crazy dude, like that was at the gospel choirs, because it's like, oh, he must can't sing. And you were right. I can't sing, but I was the hype man for the gospel choir.
Were the one that when someone sang on Sunday, the old ladies would be like, bless him, Lord. Sing anyhow. Let them use you.
Amen.
You know what I'm saying?
But I do have some trauma, I got to confess, around gospel choirs. And here's my trauma. Here's my trauma. We'll get to the urban stuff.
Okay.
Here's my trauma. I remember going, and like everyone's singing melodies, like everyone's singing their song. It's like something's off. All right, what is it? Sopranos, you sing, and then all right, altos, you sing. Tenors, you sing, and then there would get like tenors, and there would like be sections. I was like, all right, row 1 sing, row 2 sing, and then they come into me, and I was just like, oh, I felt like Achan, right? In the sin of Achan, like it just like coming down, and I was just like, yeah, y'all, is that how this is? So I have trauma behind that, like
I think we all have mine isn't around gospel choirs, but it is around tennis, so I understand. It's just those moments where you're just like, so you really gonna do that to me, right?
You're just gonna call me, like everybody knows already where this is coming from. So anyway, so like we're talking about churches, we're talking about churches in urban environments, and sometimes
church needed to show up a little harder, a little different for you. And
they needed to show up
differently for you. And
yes, they needed to show up for me different. All right, so let's talk about this. Like, what would you say are some of the gaps, right, that exist between the church and specifically urban contexts, right, and how can they be bridged?
Sometimes I don't believe that the church. Well, I believe that sometimes the church can be behind or unaware of what is going on in culture. So not knowing the things that the community around them is listening to, is moving this culture, the direction that the culture is going, even from style to preference to wholesale beliefs. I think that often pastors are unaware that the things that they see out there are happening in their church. And then if they are aware, they're not aware of the degree or the level to which it's happening at the church. And then there's the idea of there's certain sins that, this community may be dealing with that, but I don't even know how to speak to it, so I'm never going to address it. Yeah. And so then their own pastoral insecurity or leadership insecurity or lack of information keeps them from being able to address things that are actually huge in this space.
Yeah, I think that is good. I think even being able, like how I even asked the question, it was kind of like for me a trick question, and how it was phrased, because I think historically, especially here in America, where the church was not like different from the context, it was a part of the essential fabric of it. And so like oftentimes I think like, man, we got to stop going in from solely going to, we got to reach the neighborhood, to understanding how to become a part of the fabric. Because if you think about the history, especially amongst African Americans, like the history is that it has always been an essential place. Like, that's why in Sundays, historically, it's been the place where that we meet longer, because it was the place that we had freedom. We had it was the place that had impact in every area, in every aspect. And so this is not to say that, okay, so because we went long, 200 years ago, we need to keep on going long.
Well, I'm
please.
married to a preacher, so.
You said you married to, okay, well, I just got to, like, at some point, I'm just like, hey, just because they went long 300 years ago or 100 years ago, don't mean we need to go long now. Like, let's just get to our point. Let's say it, and let's go ahead and do it.
Sometimes, it's called the spirit.
It's the spirit. Like, that's, yes. Yes.
Yeah, no, I'm being facetious. I don't even think necessarily it's about, I think there's cultural things to that. There's denominational things to that. Right. There are moments being sensitive to the spirit. So I'm not even saying that. You do what you got to do, right? But I do think we do need to be aware that whether you're going to be long or not, people's attention spans are way shorter than they were 200 years ago.
It's called Netflix.
Right. So now you know, and now people know that they have options. I don't even got to come here no more. I can watch this online.
Right. And your guilt is not going to, like, you do this for the Super Bowl, right? But again, I'm also not against longer services. I'm not against any of that. What I'm saying is properly contextualized, becoming all things to all people. And I think sometimes it's like we are doing things. You've heard that of the ham, grandma and the ham analogy, right? Have you heard that?
Grandma?
The ham analogy.
And the ham.
Yes.
No,
so it's the little girl who went to her mom.
Okay.
And he says, Mama, why do you cut the ham off the
yes.
ends.
I've heard a different version.
You heard
of
a different version
of that.
All right.
Yes,
well, this
yes.
is my
Okay.
grandma in the ham.
Okay.
And she was just like, I don't know. My mama did it.
Mm-hmm.
Go ask her. Your grandma. She went to grandma. Was like, grandma, ma cut the ends, the end of the hams. Why do you do it? She told me to ask you. She didn't know why. And she was like, I don't know why I did it. I did it because your great grandma did it. Go ask your great grandma. And she went to the great grandma. Like, we cut the ends off the hams. Grandma did it. She said she don't know why she did it. She got it from you. And, mom said she did it. And she didn't understand. And ultimately, it's like, well, I don't know why those fools did it, but I did it because I only had a pan so big,
right, and that's what
that I had to cut.
That's what I had to do.
And I think sometimes we can fall into that, like we just doing stuff just because they used to do it. But there are so many things. Yes. So I think a better question is like, how do we infuse ourselves into the fabric? And I think right now the church is no longer a part of. I'm not gonna say no longer, but it's not an essential part. Less and less.
Yes.
A part of the fabric of urban and communities. And so oftentimes the church is now trying to make sure it stays unstained from the community versus engaging the community.
Yes. If you're going to be around the sheep, you're going to smell like sheep.
Yeah. And so I think that to me is critical.
Yes.
Right. And so like what are some of the ways that we can build like these partnerships so that we can be engaged?
I was actually going to say build partnerships. Mm-hmm. I think one, I do think I know of a church in a city. I have friends who go to this church, and they have said to me that the community around us wants to know why you're here because you don't engage with us at all. Yeah. It's almost like the church's purpose is to serve itself. Yeah. So you all come to this building to be together and then to leave, but we don't exist around you. Yeah. And there's something broken about that. Yes. So to me, a church should not exist in a community and not be a part of that community, not be assisting that community, not be aware of what's going on. Even awareness is
being a good neighbor.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I know that when we park on the street every Sunday, y'all don't have parking spots. Yeah. So now we're aware of that. So now how can we be good neighbors? Right. We're aware that when we shovel the snow in front of the building,
don't throw it on their driveway.
Right. And then ignore that the old lady across the street can't shovel hers. So we're just like, well, if we were going to shovel hers. Yeah. Right. So I think that that's just being good neighbors and a part of the community, members of the community, and not just individuals who show up. But then I do think that partnering with the nonprofits in the community, with elementary schools in the community, with businesses in the community, especially a particular church I went to was across the street from a candy store. Mm. And in this particular church community, the way we knew we were going to win people to the church was through the children. Yeah. Well, if we know the children are going to the candy store. Yep. We're going to partner with the owners of the candy store. We will be in relationship with them so that we are hanging signs and we're sending people in there and we're spending time and we're giving money and we're donating and we're fixing this candy store up and we're making it a safe space in the community because we want to impact the children in the community. So
I think that is the difference between the church simply existing in the city to truly being for the city. Yes. Like, it's just like not just about them, but it's about the overall, right? It's kind of like when the neighborhood flourishes, we all flourish, right? And I think that is there's a way to still be explicitly Christian, but intentionally for our city. I mean, Jeremiah 29:11 talks about that often, like this seek the welfare of the city. I think it's so important for us to understand, like, what does it mean to be for the city? And so, like, one of the practices that I always go through in my mind is awareness, vision, strategy, courage, right? In that order. Awareness is like, where are we? So when we moved in here with Blueprint, and as a church, the first thing that we do is just like assessing the needs. Like, what is God already doing? What is already being served? So we said, like, for the first 6 months to a year, we're not going to do any ministries, not going to create ministries. We're just going to see what is already taking place, right? And then vision was just like, where does God want us to be, right? And there's some clarity that we've been talking about, make disciples and all the things. So like, we're not shifting our purposes and we still want to be explicitly Christian, but intentionally for the city, right? And so we do that. But then the third one is strategy. Well, how do we get there? And so for us, after we did that due diligence, what we did was, hey, we had one city group that says, hey, if you're going to be a part of this city group, you have to become a part of the PTA. because they was doing some stuff.
Wow.
And so they all joined the PTA.
Wow.
And they went to the teachers and said, hey, you guys, to the teachers, we want to make your job so that all you have to do is focus on the teaching of the kids. And you know what happened? The teachers loved us, right? The kids, the parents loved us because we were for their kids. And, you know, and so it's just like, but then we went to, you know, to the rec center instead of us going to start on our own league. And I'm like, again, we went to the rec center and says, hey, we want to provide all the coaching and all the staff for you. And they was like, you know, so guess what happened? The rec league loved us, right? Because we were a blessing and not a burden. Right. We weren't going in. And so just kind of thinking, and what I love about this is that in a lot of ways, My Boulevard has this kind of baked in because we have poets, we have pastors, we have practitioners, we have polymaths. And so when we go in, we don't have to try to be everything because there's natural synergy of people who are already thinking along the same way as you, and you can partner with those missionaries to do. And so that's the kind of the built-in nature of it. And even if a missionary per se is like something that you think is needed in your city, you may have someone who's doing it somewhere in the country by being connected to the Boulevard family, then you can learn like, oh, here's what you're needing to look for in your city.
Question then, when I think about that, I think about partnerships with organizations, but what about local leaders and even dealing with politics on the local level? Do you think churches should be involved in that?
I think 100%. Now, it's a difference to it becoming primary, right? And then, you know, versus it is a thing. Like, I think it's a part of the city. And I think that's one of the things that if you are in the city, you got to talk about certain things. Like there are certain things like, but I also think that we look at it from a wrong perspective. Think about it. Like when I was in seminary, the big thing was things like relativism. Cultural pluralism. Nobody was saying what the validity of relativism or pluralism. Nobody was talking like that. Like there's like, this is the water that we're swimming in. And so that's where people like would come out with a case for Christ, Lee Strobel, and like they would just come out to be missionaries and apologists to these things, talking about the exclusivity of Christianity. And I think today, you know, we spend so much time as Christians debating whether or not critical theory is a thing. And I'm just like, why are we debating whether or not critical theory is like critical theory is the water in which we are swimming? And so instead of like just acting like it's not here, why don't we become missionaries to a group of people, to children that are being raised in a world that is teaching us and that is embracing critical theory? So like, what does it look like for us to be engaged and to be missionaries to show kind of why Christ is the only true solution? And I think that is the thing. But again, it's us shifting to, you know, to thinking like missionaries.
Yeah. And when you think about it, when we talk about going to be missionaries overseas, you know, whatever their political beliefs are, whatever their religious beliefs are, whatever their cultural beliefs are, we learn them, understand them, and go and serve them in it. Whether we agree with what they believe politically, culturally, whatever, we understand that that's what it is. And so we're going to serve them where they are. And we understand that. And I think what we do wrong here is that we pick a side and then we say, I don't even want to deal with this other side. Instead of recognizing what you believe and then meeting you there, we're like, I don't want to deal with people who think that way, or people who vote that way, or people who talk that way. And what that does is it makes us selective missionaries.
Yep. It's a biblical principle that says we become all things to all people, so that by all possible means that we might save some. I oftentimes quote that verse because I think that is a verse that is needed. But what I also love about it is that Paul never lost his identity. He says, even to those under the law, I become as one under the law, even though I have the law of Christ. To those outside of the law, I become one as one outside of the law, even though I have the law of God. Right? You see what I'm saying? So here's the thing. Paul never lost his identity. As he's going, he understands that he is a missionary, but he knew that there's certain flexibility that he had to engage in order to win. But for us, we divide over preferential stuff versus principally driven things, and I think that is the thing that's killing us. You know,
I do also think one of the ways in which the church can be not thinking well, again, not all but some, is that the idea of the long game. Like, I am in this community not to see change happen in a year necessarily, but that I may start entertaining these kids, right? But I may be doing discipleship with some 5-year-olds, and it's when they graduate high school that I see the fruit of what we invested in them.
Well, it's true that if you're going to disciple 5-year-olds, there has to be some entertainment.
That's true. Yes, we all are very versed in 5-year-olds. Yes. So
there's got to be.
So there will be entertainment.
Yeah, there
Amen.
Will be some
so
entertainment.
Yes, some biblical entertainment. But what I'm saying is though, but understanding that I may not see fruit until graduation from high school. These people, but do I have that mindset? Do we as a Christian community have the mindset that we're here for the long haul in these relationships? And I
oftentimes tell people, don't overestimate what you can do in a year, but don't underestimate what you can do in 5 or 10 or whatever. Like Blueprint, I tell you all the stories about we've done in Blueprint, and we're now going on 14. This is our 15th year that we are in. And I believe right now we are just now getting to the point where people in the neighborhood are walking to church and coming to church. Like, because we've always said, man, and it's taken 15 years of just being present, serving on them, loving on them,
being a direct
and doing
center,
that. And
in the school.
And that's the thing, right? It's just now, like, they knew about us, but they weren't coming to the church. Yes. They weren't coming to, now we're starting to see people coming to the church. And that's the part that we play the long game. We need to become a part of the community. And I think we also need to utilize our members to do ministry where life exists. Like, you have poets, you have practitioners, you have polymaths within your church. And I think one of the things that we overlook oftentimes is that how can we turn a lawyer or a doctor, or instead of like, praise the Lord, we need it, and I'm a pastor and I know we need it, praise the Lord, but everybody doesn't have to be the hospitality leader or a host leader. Like, we could utilize their talents, utilize their gifting, utilize their calling for something more than just simply helping us to pull off a better Sunday.
Yep. You know what? Because in that community, there's actual needs. And if this person in your church is a CPA, it'd be awesome to go out into the community and say, I will help you balance your books out, to businesses. When you think about the needs of your community, and as a church, if you can show up and meet some of those needs, housing issues, domestic abuse. I mean, I know churches had to show up in the pandemic, education, schools that are in bad shape, all of those things. I think it behooves churches to recognize the needs in their community and say, how can we practically show up? How can we meet these needs?
That. Because we just basically... that's going to take getting to know our people.
Right.
Because what we're not saying is go out and go study how to be all these things to all people. We're saying God has equipped your church already to be here. So I feel like there's so much more we can say.
Yes. Yeah, because, because everybody in the church has a role. Yeah. So we're not just looking for pastors. We're looking for the men. We're looking for the women. We're looking for the teenagers. We're looking for the kids. Everyone who has the ability can function and go out and do the thing that God has called them to do in their context.
That's it. I always say, hey, when people come become members at our church, it says you are a welcome addition, but you're not the center of attention. We all got a responsibility and roles. Oh no, I pulled that from my house. I tell every one of my children, you are a welcome addition, but you are not the center of attention.
Honey, we need your voice, but we don't always got to hear your voice, right?
That is the thing.
Amen. No, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. So, yes.
All right. Well, there's more again, but we got more episodes to unpack this stuff, right? And again, if there are things that you would like us to talk about, put it in the comments. Let us know.
Interact with us.
Let us know so that we can... we can put out what the people want, put out what the people need. Yes. So we're excited that this is another episode of My Boulevard.